Well, it's really a great honor to be here. I want to thank Qatar University, British Council, Museum of Islamic Art, and Professor Fudayl for the wonderful introduction. I don't know if you noticed the trick. He introduced the beautiful young ladies, and then he decided that I'll be the first speaker to emphasize that I'm the oldest. Okay, so thank you, sir. I am so much excited about the notion of learning from city, how the city can teach you, how the city can inspire you, how the city can stimulate you and provoke questions and ideas in our minds, not as a sophisticated cultured people, but even the regular people walking and experiencing the street, the city. So to me, this notion of how the city can play a sort of a knowledge-based kind of role, it's really important. And I want to share some ideas regarding this and related to the whole notion of public art. And I want to start with the idea of how cities should belong to everyone. And if we claim, this is a beautiful quote by Jane Jacobs, suggesting that if we really want to create city for people, then it should be also created by people, and therefore the voice of people is fundamentally important. I'm also excited about the notion of the creative city, and as I said, we looked for a long number of decades. We looked at city only from a pragmatic, functional point of view. Cities are zones and industrial areas and residential areas and commercial areas and roads and so on and so forth. But it's about time, as Charles Landry is suggesting, to look also at components like creativity, culture, heritage, art, and so on and so forth. With that said, it's also important to acknowledge that there is a new kind of trend within both the research and also practice of urban design and urban planning and even architecture, which is suggesting that we have to move a bit towards a knowledge-based urban development and architecture. And this is my book that was published only 6 months ago, where I tackled the whole notion of knowledge-based urban development within the context of the Middle East. Now, before coming back to Doha, I was doing a tour in Europe, part of Eastern Europe, and I had a discussion with colleagues, and he said, what are you going once you're back in Doha? I said, I have a wonderful event organized by the British Council and Qatar University regarding public art. And they said, yeah, we need you to see one of our important public art. And they showed me grossly, right? And then I realized that it's not only in Mostar, but they have another one in Hong Kong and Los Angeles too. But this is not the kind of public art that I'm interested in. In the same trip, particularly in niche Serbia, I saw another form of public art where public art in a very abstracted form is manifesting a very emotional, even spiritual moment from the history of the country and the history of the world. This is a sort of a memorial park where a number of lives were wasted and killed, and a wonderful artist came up with this abstracted idea with the three hands of a kid and a mother and a father coming from the ground, fighting this kind of hostility and showing that life is important. And coming to the Gulf, it seems to me that the Gulf went through different paradigms when it comes to the relation between spaces and art. And particularly, we had an era where public art was used basically in roundabouts to express very naive, shallow representation of local identity. So you see all these kind of the coffee pots, the falcons, and it's scattered all over the roundabouts, all over the Gulf cities. And we had our portion in Doha. They changed a lot of roundabouts into a lot of intersections now. But before that, we had the same representation in a lot of spaces around roundabouts about the city. And then we started to have what I would call it visions, and I love so much the quote that you have used, Professor Fodil, because we had two main visions. One is coming from Qatar Museum regarding the importance of public art, and the second one is related to the work of the Ministry of Municipality and Environment and also Ashghal, under the umbrella of revisiting the concept of streets in Qatar and how to transform streets into vibrant places. And maybe art, inserting art within this matrix, will end up with a more positive experience. Public art also in Qatar is related to destinations, not that much related to public spaces per se. So we have an excellent examples of public arts, but still, as Professor Fodel rightly stated, in the university, in the airport, in Qatar, but we still need a one more level towards public art within the city and within the public spaces of the city. Some of the landscape and art was also knowledge-based art and knowledge-based landscape, and the kind of words that would again stimulate the minds and allow people to ask questions. And public art also should consider social and cultural values. So some art might fit in another context, particularly the issue of public art, because public art is about exposure. It's not like going to a museum and enjoy a piece of art. Public art is well exposed, and therefore the social and cultural values are very important. The wonderful work of Damien Hirst is still covered and recovered and covered and recovered because of the whole issue of the acceptance of the work within the cultural and even religious values of the country. Public art also can be an interesting manifestation of solidarity and social cohesion, and we saw very interesting examples of this, particularly in the first months of the blockade. But what I'm calling for today, therefore we will have the rest of the speakers and also hopefully a vibrant discussion, is that I'm calling for a connection and integration between art, public spaces, fun, architecture, and urbanism. And I would say that we don't need any boundaries between all of these realms. And I would even suggest that one example like the fire station, where you already have the museum, the studios, the cafeteria, the park, the open space, the public art, everything is speaking to each other in a very positive way towards engaging the community. The same story would go with the Museum of Islamic Art here. It's not only about the sophistication of the museum, but how the museum is becoming a sort of a backyard for the community. People are here to have fun, to have picnics, and in the process of doing that, they integrate with the museum and integrate with art. So the whole notion of, again, turning these strict boundaries into blurred boundaries is an idea that I'm so much excited about. And therefore, I want to end up by saying that I'm suggesting a sort of a paradigm shift, which I call it here, contextualization of public art. It's not only about the piece or the surrounding, it's about the whole matrix that would suggest moving towards stimulating, thoughts-provoking, creative, and knowledge-based art in vibrant urban public spaces. And thank you so much for having me.